Brenda's hand hovered over my weekly pill organizer, her acrylic nails tapping the plastic. "You know," she sighed, "this stuff is just delaying the inevitable. Why don't you just get it over with?" And my son, Mark, in the next room, just stared at his laptop, pretending he did not hear his wife sentence me to death. They thought I was just a sick old woman. They forgot who my husband was, and they had no idea what he left me. My name is Eleanor, and I am 68 years old. Or perhaps I was. It feels difficult to measure time since Frank died. For 45 years. We had a life in Boulder, Colorado, one built inside a small house filled with books and the quiet hum of Frank's computers. He was a brilliant man, my Frank. A software engineer who thought in code and spoke in quiet, measured sentences. He was my anchor. Now, 6 months after the funeral, I was adrift. My only son, Mark, and his wife, Brenda, had insisted, "You cannot be alone in that big house, Mom," Mark had said, his eyes glancing at his phone every few seconds. Brenda had clasped my hand, her grip surprisingly firm, her voice like warm honey. "We want you with us, Eleanor. We'll take care of everything." So I left Boulder. I left my garden, my neighbors, and the comfortable sag of my favorite reading chair. I was moved into their penthouse in downtown Denver, a place that felt less like a home and more like the inside of a glossy magazine. Everything was white, or grey, or chrome. The windows were vast, floor-to-ceiling sheets of glass that overlooked a city I did not know. It was beautiful, I suppose, but sterile. It was a home built for appearances, not for living. I became a ghost in their pristine world. My boxes of books, Frank's old records, the framed photos of Mark as a gap-toothed little boy, they were all deemed clutter. Brenda, with a strained smile, had them moved to a storage unit 10 miles away. "We just have such a specific aesthetic, Eleanor," she explained, as if I were a confused child. "You understand?" I was allowed to keep my toothbrush and a few changes of clothes, the ones Brenda deemed suitable enough not to clash with her minimalist decor. Brenda was a lifestyle consultant, which seemed to mean she spent her days taking stylized photos of herself, drinking green juice, and recommending expensive face creams to thousands of people on the internet, in front of Mark. She was the perfect, caring daughter-in-law, always asking if I was comfortable, if I needed anything. But when Mark was in a meeting or locked in his home office, her face would settle into a mask of bored impatience. Her kindness was passive, a thin veneer that barely concealed the deep contempt she held for me. A sigh when I asked where the teacups were. A dismissive wave when I tried to recount a memory of Frank. My presence was an inconvenience, made worse by my physical needs. I have a heart condition, an arrhythmia that requires a specific, expensive medication every single day. Without it, my world tilts, my chest flutters and tightens, a terrifying reminder of my own fragility. With it, I am stable. I am normal. Frank had always handled it. He handled everything. He managed the finances, paid the bills online, and even set up the smart television. He spoke the language of the modern world, a language I never had to learn. His sudden death left me utterly vulnerable, like a sailor stripped of his compass and charts. I did not know our bank passwords. I did not know how to navigate the automated prescription portals. I was, in practical terms, an invalid. Mark, swallowed whole by his demanding job at a tech startup called Apex Digital Solutions, was no help. He was always stressed, always wired. his face illuminated by the blue light of one screen or another. The affectionate boy who used to build forts with me in the living room was gone, replaced by this strained, distant man who flinched at his wife's slightest sign of displeasure. The tension started, as it always does, with money, or rather, the cost of me. Brenda began complaining, first in whispers to Mark that she thought I could not hear, then in more direct sighs at the kitchen island. It centered, predictably, on my prescription. "Eleanor," she said one afternoon, holding the pharmacy bag at arm's length as if it were contaminated. I was looking at the bills. "Are we sure we need to keep paying for this specific brand name stuff? There has to be a cheaper version." I tried to explain that the doctor had been very specific, that this formulation was the only one that worked without debilitating side effects. She just shook her head, her eyes already distant. "It just seems incredibly expensive for, well, you know." I did know. She was calculating the cost of keeping me alive, and she had decided it was poor value for money. My world shrank to the size of the guest room, a 10 by 12 box with beige walls and no personality. It was not a guest room, really. It was a storage closet for their unwanted furniture. And now, for me, my days, once filled with reading and gardening, now revolved around service. I became their silent, unpaid help. I was the first one awake, brewing the expensive, single-origin coffee Brenda demanded. I cooked meals that Brenda would pick at, pushing the food around her plate before declaring it too heavy. I learned to scrub the glass shower doors until they were invisible, to fold Mark's shirts with the military precision she insisted upon, and to launder her delicate $1,000 blouses by hand. The most critical part of my routine, my medication, became Brenda's new tool of control. It began subtly. "Oh, Eleanor, I completely forgot to run to the pharmacy," she would say, her hand flying to her mouth in mock dismay. "I've just been so swamped." This meant I would miss my evening dose. The first time, I felt the familiar, terrifying flutter in my chest, a lightheadedness that made the pristine white walls of the penthouse feel like they were closing in. Then she began bringing it to me late, often hours past the time I was supposed to take it. I would be sitting on the edge of my bed, hands trembling, trying not to show my panic. She would finally appear at my door, rattling the pill bottle. "Here you go," she would say, her tone bright and dismissive, as if she were handing me a piece of candy instead of the medicine that kept my heart beating correctly. I tried, once, to speak to Mark. I waited until Brenda was out at one of her networking lunches. I found him in his home office, his eyes fixed on 3 different monitors. "Mark," I started, my voice sounding weak even to me. "I am worried about my medication. Brenda has been forgetting." He did not look away from the screens. He just sighed, a sound of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Mum, please," he said, his fingers still flying across the keyboard. "Don't stress Brenda. She is under a lot of pressure with her brand. She's managing this whole household, you included. Just try to be a little more grateful." The words hit me harder than a slap. Not grateful. I was a burden he had delegated. The confirmation came a few days later. I was polishing the chrome legs of the dining table when Brenda walked past, her phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing. "I know. Right," she said to one of her friends. "It is like having a toddler. I am literally tolerating this annoying old woman in my house, and she just keeps..." needing things. It is exhausting. I froze, my hand hovering over the table. She saw me. She looked right at me, held my gaze, and then turned away, still talking, still laughing. As she walked into her bedroom and shut the door, that was when I knew I had to get the medicine myself. I still had my laptop. I went to the online pharmacy portal, the one Frank had set up for me years ago. I typed in my password. Access denied. I tried again. Access denied. I used the forgot password link, waiting for an email that never came. She had changed the password. She had locked me out of my own medical care, severing my last line of independence. The final shackle was clamped on the next week. Brenda found me in the kitchen, holding my wallet. "Eleanor, what are you doing with that?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "I thought I might go for a walk, perhaps buy my own necessities," I murmured. She smiled, a cold, thin-lipped expression. "Do not be silly. You might fall. Besides, I should be managing your expenses for you, just to make sure everything is organized. Give me your credit card. I will hold on to it." It was not a request. I handed it over. My health began to suffer, just as she intended. The missed doses and the hours-long delays were taking their toll. The mild flutters became thumping, painful palpitations that would steal my breath. I would grip the edge of the kitchen counter, waiting for the arrhythmia to pass, praying I would not collapse onto her polished marble floors. One night, unable to sleep, I sat on the hard, unwelcoming bed in my room. I felt utterly defeated, a prisoner waiting for a sentence. I idly picked up my old wallet, the one she had let me keep because it was worn and held no value. I ran my fingers through the empty card slots, and then I felt it. A small, hard object tucked into a hidden flap I had forgotten existed. I pulled it out. It was a single, old-fashioned key. Taped to it was a small piece of paper, folded into a tiny square. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. Frank's neat, precise handwriting was unmistakable. It said, "Storage Room 7B, Contingency." A jolt went through my chest. But this time, it was not the arrhythmia. It was something else. It was a tiny, cold spark of hope. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I sat on the edge of the guest room bed, the plastic weekly pill organizer open on my lap. The little compartments were mostly empty. I had 4 pills left. 4. Enough for 2 days. If I skipped the evening dose. Enough for 4 days. If I cut them in half with a fingernail, which I had been doing. My supply was gone, and Brenda had not refilled it. The familiar tightness was building in my chest, a dull ache that I knew was part anxiety, part reality. I was trying to arrange the 4 remaining halves into the Wednesday and Thursday slots when the door opened without a knock. Brenda stood there, her face a mask of sculpted rage. She was holding a piece of paper, a credit card statement, pinching it between her thumb and forefinger. "I cannot believe you," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "After everything we talked about, you are still spending money on this." She held up the statement. "I saw the charge from the online pharmacy from 3 weeks ago, the last time I had successfully ordered a refill before she locked me out of the account." "Brenda, that was from last month," I stammered, my hands instinctively closing the pill organizer. "That is my medicine. I need it. I need it to live." Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh. It was the ugliest sound I had ever heard. "Live," she repeated, stepping into the room. You call this living, sitting in this beige room, waiting for your next meal. You are not living. Eleanor, you are a burden. You are a massive, expensive, exhausting burden on Mark. Have you even looked at him lately? He is so stressed he looks 10 years older. He is killing himself to pay for this apartment, for this life, and for you. She advanced on me. I shrank back against the headboard. That is not true, I whispered, but the words had no air behind them. It is true, she snapped. Her eyes darted down to the plastic box in my hands, then to the single, amber-coloured prescription bottle on my nightstand, the emergency supply Frank had insisted I keep, now containing only a few remaining pills. Before I could react, she lunged. Her hand, cold and strong, snatched the pill organizer from my lap, sending the tiny, halved pills scattering across the floor. Then she grabbed the bottle from the nightstand. No, I cried out, a real, desperate sound. Brenda, please, you do not understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, she hissed. She turned and marched out of the room. I stumbled after her, my bare feet cold on the polished concrete floor of the hallway. I followed her into the kitchen, the vast, white, sterile heart of the penthouse. She went straight to the sink, her heels clicking with sharp, angry purpose. With one hand, she flicked the switch for the garbage disposal. The machine roared to life, a sudden, violent sound in the quiet apartment. She held the bottle high, looked me straight in the eye, and smiled. Why don't you just get it over with? She upended the bottle. The last of my pills rattled down into the black hole of the drain. Then she picked up my weekly organizer, opened all the compartments, and shook it clean. The small, white fragments disappeared into the grinding maw. The sound of the disposal was deafening, a mechanical scream that seemed to be chewing up the very air in the room. My heart was hammering, a wild, painful rhythm, but my gaze flew past her, past the gleaming kitchen island, to the living room. Mark was there. He was sitting at the long dining table, his laptop open, his face illuminated by a video call. The noise from the kitchen was impossible to ignore. I saw his head lift. I saw him glance over. His eyes met mine for one agonizing second. He saw me, clutching the doorframe. He saw his wife, her arm extended over the sink. He heard the fight. He heard the industrial shriek of the disposal grinding my medicine to pulp. He knew. I watched him. I saw his expression flicker, not with horror or anger, but with annoyance. He was being interrupted. He broke eye contact first, deliberately. He reached for the sleek, silver noise-cancelling headphones resting beside his laptop. He picked them up, his movements smooth and unhurried. He slid them over his ears, adjusting the fit. Then he turned his chair, just slightly, angling himself away from me, away from the kitchen, and focused once more on the screen in front of him. He was gone. The sound of the disposal wound down. Brenda flicked the switch, and the silence that rushed in was terrible. I did not faint. I did not scream. I simply sank. My legs gave out, and I slid down the doorframe to sit on the cold, hard floor. It was not my heart that had failed. It was my heart that had been broken, utterly and completely. I do not know how long I lay on the cold floor, listening to the silence of the penthouse. Eventually, the adrenaline faded, and the physical reality set in. My body, deprived of its regulator, began to betray me. By 2 in the morning, the attack came. It was not a gentle flutter. It was a violent, suffocating seizure in my chest, a desperate, frantic drumbeat that seemed to shake my entire skeleton. I could not breathe. Pain, sharp and blinding, shot down my left arm. I was drowning. Right there on the designer rug. I managed to bang my fist against the wall twice before the world went black. The next time I opened my eyes, I was staring at the acoustic ceiling tiles of an emergency room. I heard the steady beep of a monitor, a rhythm that was not my own. Then I heard Brenda's voice. It was high, strained, and laced with a theatrical tremor. I just went to check on her, she was telling a doctor, and she was on the floor. She is just so confused lately. Doctor, we are worried sick. Mark was there, standing beside her, his face pale. He looked exhausted. A woman in a blue polo shirt, a hospital social worker, was standing with them, holding a clipboard. Mrs. Wallace, Eleanor, the doctor said, turning to me. His voice was kind but firm. Your heart is in a severe arrhythmia. Your son and daughter-in-law tell us you have not been compliant with your medication. I tried to speak. My throat was dry, my voice a useless rasp. She threw. Brenda cut me off immediately, her hand flying to her chest in a gesture of pained sympathy. Oh, doctor, this is what I mean, she said, her eyes welling with crocodile tears. She gets these delusions. She hides her pills. She accuses us of trying to harm her. We cannot manage it anymore. We try to give her the medicine, but she refuses. We are terrified she is going to have a stroke, or worse. The social worker stepped forward. Mrs. Wallace, your family is very concerned. They feel you cannot safely care for yourself at home. I looked past them, my eyes begging Mark. Mark, I whispered. My son, my only child, finally met my gaze. There was no love there. There was no anger. There was just a vast, hollow emptiness. He cleared his throat. It is true, he said, his voice flat. We have tried our best. We really have. But she is a danger to herself. We need help. That was the moment my fate was sealed. The kind doctor's expression hardened into one of professional assessment. The social worker made a final note on her clipboard. I was no longer a person. I was a problem to be managed. I was not discharged. I was transferred. They did not take me back to the penthouse. An ambulance, not a family car, came for me. They drove me across the city, far from the gleaming towers of downtown, to a place called Pinecrest Meadows. The name conjured images of green fields and tall, dignified trees. The reality was a one-story, concrete building with barred windows, tucked behind a highway overpass in a part of the city people avoided. The air smelled of bleach and boiled vegetables. Mark and Brenda were there to sign the intake forms. A stony-faced administrator handed Brenda a clear plastic bag. All personal effects must be secured by the facility, she said. Brenda efficiently emptied my purse, my phone, my wallet, the old leather one Frank had given me, the one that still held the key to storage unit 7B. No, I pleaded, reaching with a weak hand. My phone. Please. Mark. I need my phone. It is the rules, Mom, Mark said, staring at a spot on the wall just above my head. It is for the best. You need to rest. No distractions. We will handle everything. We will tell everyone you are resting, Brenda added, handing the plastic bag back to the nurse. "We will manage all your calls." They turned and left. They did not say goodbye. I was wheeled into a small, dim room. The walls were painted a sickly, peeling beige. My roommate was a skeletal woman who stared at the ceiling, moaning softly. The window looked out onto an air conditioning unit. I was alone, with nothing. A terrible, cold clarity settled over me. This had all been too efficient, too smooth. I remembered, with a sickening lurch, a stack of papers I had signed in the fog of grief right after Frank's funeral. Mark had put them in front of me, his voice soft. "Just formalities. Mom, just letting me help with your medical paperwork in case of an emergency." A medical power of attorney. They had not just abandoned me. They had not just suggested this. They had used my own signature to have me declared incompetent. They had legally and perfectly buried me alive. Pinecrest Meadows was not a place for recovery. It was a waiting room for death. It was a concrete box where the unwanted elderly were stored, medicated into silence, and billed until their savings ran dry. I saw it in the first 24 hours. I saw it in the dull, vacant eyes of my roommate, in the rough hands of the daytime orderlies, and in the sheer, hopeless silence of the hallways after dark. The medication they gave me here was different, a cheap, generic beta blocker that fogged my mind and made my limbs feel like lead, but which did little for the arrhythmia. It was population control, not medical care. I knew then that Brenda and Mark had not just deposited me. They had sentenced me. The shock and the grief I felt on the penthouse floor cooled, hardening into something dense and cold. Rage. If I was to die, I would not die in this beige room, staring at a water stain shaped like a human face. So I played the part. I leaned into the role they had written for me. I became the confused, frail Eleanor. I asked the same questions over and over. I forgot the nurses' names minutes after they told me. I looked at the mashed potatoes on my tray with vacant confusion. I was compliant, quiet, and absolutely no trouble. The staff, overworked and underpaid, quickly categorized me as stable and left me alone. I became invisible. And in the shadows of that invisibility, I began to plan. My focus narrowed to one person, the night orderly, Leo. He was young, maybe 22 or 23, with exhausted eyes and textbooks tucked into his bag. He was the only one who spoke to me like I was still a person. He would check my blood pressure, his touch gentle, and mutter under his breath about his statistics homework. For 2 weeks. I said nothing, just watched him. Then, one night, around 3 a.m, the hallway was thick with the silence of the drugged and the sleeping. I shuffled to the nurse's station, where he was highlighting a textbook. "Leo," I whispered. He looked up, startled. "Mrs. Wallace, you should be in bed. Are you okay?" "I cannot sleep," I said, letting my voice tremble. I held onto the counter, pretending to be weaker than I was. "I keep thinking about my things. Your things. When they brought me here, they took my wallet. The administrator put it in a locker. I knew this because I had watched her. Inside, there was an old key. Just an old key to a storage unit." He was listening, wary but kind. "It has my husband's things." I lied, the words tasting strange and sharp in my mouth. "Frank. It has our wedding album, the real one, the one with the leather cover, and the pictures of Mark, my son, when he was a baby. Before." I let a tear roll down my cheek. It was not entirely fake. Brenda, my daughter-in-law, she is going to clear it out. She hates clutter. She is going to throw it all away. Leo, she is going to throw away my whole life. He winced. He clearly knew enough about my file to know the name Brenda. Mrs. Wallace. I just want to see it one last time, I pleaded, gripping his arm. I know I am not getting out of here. I know that. I need to hold that album. I need to remember who I was. He looked down the dark hallway, his decent nature warring with the rules of the place that paid him. My shift ends at 6, he said, his voice a low murmur. The morning changeover is chaos. Everyone is busy. I cannot promise anything. Thank you, I whispered. 2 nights later, he did it. At 5:30 in the morning, he wheeled an empty laundry hamper to the service exit. He handed me a dark green hoodie and a baseball cap from his backpack. Keep your head down. Act confused if anyone sees us. He pushed me through the steel door, into the cold, damp morning air. The alarm was coded to ignore the exit between 5:30 and 6 for deliveries. He put me in his dented, 10-year-old Honda, and we drove. My heart was pounding. But it was not the arrhythmia. It was adrenaline. It was life. The storage facility was a 20-minute drive away. He had retrieved my wallet from the unlocked personal effects cabinet. The key was still there, tucked in the flap. Unit 7B. It was a standard, roll-up metal door. My hands were shaking so hard I could not fit the key into the rusty padlock. Leo gently took it from me and opened it. He rolled up the door with a loud, metallic shriek. He shined his phone's flashlight inside. It was not full of albums or memories. It was sterile. A few tall metal filing cabinets, a dozen sealed banker's boxes. Where are the photos? Leo asked, looking confused. They must be in a safe box, I said, moving past him, drawn by an instinct I could not explain. I pulled open a drawer on a cabinet, old tax returns. I moved to the back wall. There, on a low shelf, was a black, fireproof iron box. It had a combination lock. My mind raced. Frank. Contingency. What would it be? I tried our anniversary. The lock held. I tried Mark's birthday. It held. Then I tried the date I met him. September 10th, 1975. 9, 1, 0, 7, 5. The latch clicked open. We have to go. Mrs. Wallace, Leo urged from the doorway. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, there was no money. There were no pictures. There was an ancient, heavy laptop that looked like a black brick. There was a single, silver USB drive. And there was a thick, sealed envelope with my name on it, written in Frank's precise, familiar hand. I tore it open. My dearest Eleanor, the letter began, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are in the very situation I feared. I hope you are safe. I skipped down, my eyes flying across the page. You thought I was just a simple engineer. In truth, many years ago, I wrote a piece of code, a middleware solution I named Ouroboros. It acts as a translator, allowing old, legacy banking systems to communicate with modern applications. It is invisible, it is highly secure, and it is almost impossible to replace. Dozens of major tech companies use it to run their core products. They have no idea who wrote it. They pay an annual license fee to an anonymous trust I established in Chicago. Eleanor, that trust is yours. You are the sole beneficiary. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. The USB drive contains the keys. The laptop contains the original source code. The trust holds the patents. It generates millions of dollars a year. Our attorney, Arthur Vance, is the trustee. He is waiting for your call. He knows what to do. Mrs. Wallace, it is almost 6, Leo said, his voice frantic. I closed the letter, my hands no longer shaking. I picked up the USB drive and the laptop. Leo, I said, and my voice was not the voice of the frail old woman from Pinecrest. It was a voice he had not heard before. You did a good thing. Leo got me back inside Pinecrest just before the 6 in the morning shift change, a ghost returning to her crypt. I hid the heavy laptop and the small silver USB drive under the paper-thin mattress of my cot. I kept Frank's letter tucked against my skin. I spent the entire day playing my part, the confused and compliant old woman, while the truth burned beneath my hospital gown. I was not a victim. I was an heiress. That night, I waited for Leo. When he made his rounds, his face still etched with the anxiety of our pre-dawn trip, I motioned him close. Did you find your photo albums? He whispered, glancing nervously down the dark hallway. I found something better, I said, my voice low and clear. Leo, I need one last favor. I need your phone. Just for 5 minutes. I need to make one call to a number in Chicago. He saw the change in my eyes. The desperate, frail woman from the night before was gone. He saw the woman who had opened that iron safe. He handed me his phone without a word. I dialed the number from Frank's letter. It rang twice. A crisp, professional voice answered. Vance. My name is Eleanor Wallace, I said, my voice steady. I am Frank's wife. I have the contingency file and the keys to Ouroboros. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then silence. Mr. Vance. Eleanor, he said, his voice thick with a sudden, profound emotion. I have been waiting for this call for 5 years. Where are you? A facility called Pinecrest Meadows. My son had me committed. Not for long, Vance said, his voice hardening. I am activating the Trust's emergency protocol. Do not speak to any staff. Do not sign anything. A local legal team will be there at 9 o'clock. The next morning, Pinecrest Meadows was thrown into chaos. At exactly 9 o'clock, 2 men and a woman in severe, expensive suits walked through the front doors. They were not from social services. They were from the most powerful corporate law firm in Denver. The facility director, the same woman who had processed my intake, met them in the lobby. I watched from the hallway. I am afraid Mrs. Wallace cannot have visitors without her son's approval. The director began. The woman, who looked like she could chew nails, smiled. That will not be necessary. As of 7 a.m. this morning, your facility's medical director received a court order based on a full psychiatric review by our independent team, declaring Mrs. Wallace perfectly competent. Her son's medical power of attorney is void. You are now illegally imprisoning our client. You have 2 options. You can release her to us immediately with all her personal property, or you can wait here for the police. The director's face went white. 10 minutes later, I was walking out of that building, dressed in my own clothes. The woman handed me my wallet with Frank's key still inside and a new, slim box. A new phone, Mrs. Wallace. Mr. Vance has already had your old number ported over. Your car is waiting. I walked past the gaping nurses. I saw Leo by the time clock, his eyes wide. I paused, took his hand, and pressed a folded piece of paper into it, a check, drawn by the law firm, for $50,000. For your education? I whispered. You are a good man. I did not look back. The car, a gleaming black sedan, did not take me to the penthouse. It took me to the Four Seasons. A suite had been reserved for me under a name I chose from Frank's letter. The name of the holding company, Mrs. Stone. Arthur Vance flew in from Chicago that afternoon. He was Frank's age, sharp and kind, with a mind that moved as quickly as my late husband's. Mrs. Stone, he said, shaking my hand warmly. It is a profound honor to finally meet you. We sat in the suite, high above the city, the light streaming in. Frank was a genius, Eleanor, he said. But he was also a cautious man. He saw the influence Brenda had on Mark. He set up this trust to protect you. He protected me, I whispered, thinking of the storage unit. To the tune, Vance said, opening his briefcase, of approximately $8 million a year in licensing fees. The trust's current assets are just over $70 million. It is all yours. The patents, the code, the licenses. You have 100% control over Ouroboros. I let the numbers wash over me. 70 million. Brenda had destroyed my medicine to save a few $100s a month. Mr. Vance, I said, my voice hardening. I need the client list. Who pays us? He nodded, slid a tablet across the table. It is all there. Mostly financial tech, legacy banks. They all run on Frank's code. I scanned the list of corporate names, and then I froze. My blood ran cold. It was near the top of the list, marked as one of the largest licensees, Apex Digital Solutions. This one, I said, pointing. Apex? Vance leaned in, adjusting his glasses. Ah, yes, Apex. They are one of our biggest revenue streams. Their entire Apex Connect platform is built on Ouroboros. We licensed it to them as a small startup 6 years ago. Honestly, they got a bargain. They are completely dependent on it. If we revoked that license, their whole company would implode. My son's job, his fancy title, the source of the money that paid for the penthouse, for Brenda's designer clothes, for the life he had chosen over me. It all ran on Frank's code. Mark had thrown me away to protect his career. He had no idea that his career, his entire glass house, was built on a foundation his father had written, and which his mother now owned. I looked up at Mr. Vance, the view of the Denver skyline sharp and clear behind him. Mr. Vance, I said, the last of the frail, weak Eleanor vanishing forever. I want you to draw up a new contract for Apex Digital Solutions. The first thing I did was kill Eleanor. Not literally, of course, but the woman who had scrubbed Brenda's floors, the woman who had pleaded for her life in a beige room. She was dead. She had died on the floor of that penthouse. The woman who walked out of Pinecrest Meadows was someone else. My first call from the Four Seasons, after speaking with Vance, was to the hotel's master stylist. I need a new look, I told the concierge. Send me your best. For 3 hours, I sat in a chair overlooking the city. They cut my grey, limp hair into a sharp, silver bob that fell just at my jawline. They gave me a manicure, painting my nails a deep, dark red. I had them bring in a personal shopper. I did not buy comfort clothes. I bought armor. I bought silk blouses, sharply tailored wool trousers, and a pair of black leather heels that made a distinct, sharp sound when I walked. I was no longer Eleanor. I was, as I had told the hotel, Mrs. Stone. Arthur Vance was my general, We met every day, sometimes for 8 or 10 hours at a time. We officially formed a new entity, a Delaware corporation designed for maximum anonymity and legal protection. We called it Stonefield Holdings, LLC. This was the entity that would now, officially, own the intellectual property of Ouroboros. Frank kept meticulous records, Vance said, pushing a stack of files toward me. But they are technical. You will need to understand what you own. I was married to a software engineer for 45 years. Arthur, I said, pulling the top file toward me. I speak the language. For 2 weeks, I did not leave the hotel suite. I learned my late husband's secret life. I read his contracts. I studied his code, his notes, his projections. I had been a librarian. I knew how to organize information, how to find the pattern in the data. And the pattern I found was Frank's quiet, brilliant anger. He knew Mark's weakness. He had seen Brenda's greed, and he had built this ark, waiting for the flood. I found the original Apex Digital Solutions contract. Just as Vance had said, it was a 6-year-old document. Frank had signed it, under his anonymous development moniker, Code Frank, for a pittance, a flat fee. It was a contract he had made when Apex was just 3 men in a garage. Now, they were a multi-million-dollar corporation, and their entire flagship product, the Apex Connect platform that Mark was so proud of managing, was a house of cards built entirely on Frank's code. They had not paid a single licensing increase in all that time. They had been, for 6 years, getting the bargain of a lifetime. Their contract is set to auto-renew, Vance noted, pointing to a clause. In exactly 65 days. If we do nothing, it just rolls over for another year at the same price. I looked out the window, toward the cluster of glass towers that held Mark's office. We will not be doing nothing. Arthur, I said. You will draft a legal notification. Use the strongest language, Stonefield Holdings, LLC, as the new rights holder of the Ouroboros patent, is terminating the existing agreement upon its expiration. Vance raised an eyebrow. Terminating, not renegotiating. Oh, we will renegotiate, I said. But first, we must remind them what they stand to lose. Send the termination notice. Send it to the Chief Executive Officer and the entire legal board. Send it today. The notice went out by secure courier 5 minutes later. The response from Apex was, predictably, immediate panic. They did not know who Stonefield Holdings was. They had no idea Code Frank had sold the rights. They were, in legal terms, trapped. Their first reply was a blustering letter from their legal team, implying they would fight this. Vance and I ignored it. We let them sweat for 48 hours. Then, I gave my second instruction. Now, Arthur, I said, sipping my tea, you will send them the new contract, the one for our valued partners. The next day, a second courier arrived at the Apex CEO's office. This one contained the new 60-day contract. It was not a complex document. It was 1 page. It detailed the new licensing fee, effective at the end of their current term. Vance had suggested we double the price, maybe triple it. I had instructed him to increase it by 1,000%. It was not a number designed to make them negotiate. It was not a number intended to increase our revenue. It was a number designed to break them. It was a figure so high that it would not just wipe out their profits, it would cripple their operating budget, freeze their assets, and force massive, immediate layoffs. It was a kill shot, delivered on monogrammed legal stationery. Are you certain, Eleanor? Vance had asked, his pen hovering. "They destroyed my medicine to save a few $100s," I replied, my voice perfectly calm. "They calculated the cost of my life and decided it was too high. I am simply returning the favor. Send it." He sent it. The clock was now ticking. Apex Digital Solutions had 60 days until their entire company ceased to exist. The termination notice and the new contract hit Apex Digital Solutions like a tactical missile. From my suite at the Four Seasons, with Arthur Vance as my field marshal, I observed the fallout. Vance had sources inside their legal department who were, for a price, happy to describe the chaos. The first response was sheer panic. The CEO, a man named Henderson, had convened an all-hands emergency meeting with his top engineers. The consensus was terrifying. Ouroboros was not just a piece of their platform, it was their platform. It was woven into every line of their code. To replace it would take a team of 50 engineers at least 18 months. And that was an optimistic projection. They did not have 18 months. They had 60 days. After that, their product would cease to function. As I had anticipated, the impossible task of fixing this unfixable problem landed squarely on the desk of the star project manager, my son. Mark was summoned to the CEO's office and given a direct order from these Stonefield Holdings people: get them to a table and fix this. His career depended on it. The first emails from Mark came that afternoon, addressed to the generic legal email on our letterhead. They were professional, full of corporate jargon about synergy and mutual partnership. Vance, on my explicit instructions, did not reply. The next day, Mark's emails became more urgent. He was requesting a call, a meeting, any form of direct contact. Vance finally responded with a single, curt email. "Stonefield Holdings is not available for a call. All communication must be in writing." Mark wrote back, "We must discuss the new licensing terms. They are not viable." Vance waited 6 hours, then replied, "The terms are non-negotiable." While my son was fighting for his professional life, his wife was busy spending his money. Vance's team had, at my request, pulled up Brenda's public social media. It was a grotesque parade of consumption. A new designer handbag, brunches at $500 a plate restaurants, endless posts about living your best life. She was completely, blissfully unaware that the river of money she was bathing in was about to dry up. Mark, however, was not. Vance's team also ran quiet financial background checks. "He is getting desperate," Vance reported to me, looking up from his tablet. "He has applied for a second mortgage on the penthouse and 2 high-interest personal loans in the last 24 hours. He is trying to leverage his personal finances to prepare for the crash." He was, I realized, trying to build a lifeboat, not knowing I was the one controlling the ocean. On day 45, with just 15 days left on the clock, the real leverage play began. My source at Apex fed Vance the minutes of that morning's board meeting. The CEO had been blunt. If the Stonefield contract was not signed, the company would be insolvent by the end of the quarter. They would have to execute immediate, catastrophic layoffs, starting with the entire, inefficient Apex Connect division, Mark's entire department. He was not just failing to save the company, he was now the designated captain of the sinking ship. "They are broken, Arthur," I said, setting down my teacup. "They are terrified. It is time to offer them a concession." Vance looked puzzled. "A concession, Eleanor? I thought the point was—" "The point," I said, "is to aim the scalpel. You will call CEO Henderson directly. You will tell him that Mrs. Stone is sympathetic to their financial constraints. She finds their position unfortunate. She is willing, as a gesture of goodwill, to consider a discount. How much? Vance asked, pulling out a legal pad. That, I said, depends. Tell him Mrs. Stone is a firm believer in corporate efficiency. She cannot, in good conscience, give them a discount while they are carrying so much inefficient managerial overhead. She feels they need to trim the fat before they can be rewarded. Vance smiled, finally understanding. You want them to fire people. I want them to make a choice, I said. Tell him Stonefield Holdings would be willing to reduce the fee by 15% if they make immediate, good faith cuts to their senior project management. In fact, you have a few suggestions. I handed him a single sheet of paper. It was a list of 3 names. You will suggest, I said, that true efficiency begins at the top. You will read him that list. Vance read the first name on the list I had prepared. Mark Wallace. Exactly, I said. Let us see what Mr. Henderson values more, his company or my son. It took CEO Henderson less than 1 hour to make his decision. A 15% discount, dangled by an anonymous corporate entity, was worth far more to him than the loyalty he had for a single, mid-level employee. The math was simple. My son was a rounding error. Arthur Vance received the confirmation via email. Mr. Henderson, he read aloud to me, has confirmed that, per Stonefield's astute recommendation, Apex will be streamlining its managerial structure, effective immediately. He is very grateful for our spirit of partnership. He has accepted the deal, I translated, my voice flat. He has, Vance confirmed, and he has already sent us the signed contract with the new, reduced fee. The wire transfer for the first payment is pending. And, Vance permitted himself a small, grim smile. And my source confirms that Mark Wallace was summoned to HR 30 minutes ago. Mark, I was told later, walked into the meeting expecting to be praised for his tireless efforts to negotiate. Instead, he was met by Henderson and the head of human resources. It was brutal and quick. Restructuring, they called it. Redundancy. Last one in, first one out. They gave him a dozen flimsy corporate excuses, but the message was clear. He was terminated, effective immediately. His email was shut off before he got back to his desk. A security guard watched him pack his personal items, a framed photo of him and Brenda, a motivational poster, a coffee mug into a small cardboard box. He was shocked, completely blinds-defined. He could not understand how he had gone from being the man tasked with saving the company to the first casualty. He was, as they say, collateral damage. He must have taken the light rail home, as his company car access had also been revoked. I can picture him, sitting in that cold penthouse, the cardboard box on the marble floor, waiting for Brenda to come home from her yoga class. The report from Vance's private investigator, who was now monitoring the penthouse, was illuminating. She did not take it well. What the hell do you mean? Fired. The PI's audio log picked up her shriek, audible even through the heavy apartment door. Bren, listen. It was a blindside, Mark pleaded. Henderson they are restructuring. It is not my fault. Not your fault, she screamed. Not your fault. You let them fire you with our expenses. I just bought a $2,000 bag. Mark, We have the mortgage. What the hell did you do? The fight, according to the report, was biblical. It was not a fight born of partnership or shared struggle. It was the sound of a parasite realizing its host was dying. She accused him of being weak, of being incompetent, of failing her. He, finally broken, yelled back, accusing her of her reckless spending, of her vanity, of her coldness. She realized, in that moment, that the lifestyle she had cultivated, the one she documented for her thousands of online followers, was over. The game was up. While Mark sat at the kitchen island, his head in his hands, finally broken and sobbing, Brenda did something else. She went into their bedroom, opened her walk-in closet, and began, very quietly, to pack. She took her designer bags. She took her jewelry. She took the emergency cash Mark kept in the safe. The next morning, after Mark had cried himself to sleep on the $1,000 sofa, Brenda left, but not before one final act of cruelty. She went to his laptop. She initiated a full transfer of every liquid cent in their joint checking and savings accounts, the money Mark had been desperately trying to protect, into her own private account. She drained him completely. She did not even have the courage to face him. She just left a small, cream-colored envelope on the coffee table next to his head. When he woke up hours later, the apartment was silent. The closet was half empty, and he found the note. It was not long, just one sentence, written in her perfect, flowing script. I cannot be with a failure, just like your mother. Mark was left alone. He was in a multi-million-dollar penthouse he could no longer afford, with no job, no money, and no wife. He was utterly, and finally, broken. And I had not had to lay a single hand on him. Mark was a ghost, rattling around in a glass cage. The foreclosure notices for the penthouse had been served. The utilities were next. He was unemployed, unemployable, and alone. But decades of corporate ambition do not die easily. He had one move left. He was a man targeted. He believed by a faceless entity. He had been sacrificed by his CEO to appease this new, ruthless power. He decided, in a final, desperate gamble, that he had to appeal to the human being behind the curtain. He could not just be erased without knowing why. He used the last of the available credit on a new, prepaid phone to call Arthur Vance's office. He did not demand. He begged. He requested a single, in-person meeting with the owner of Stonefield Holdings. He wanted to explain his situation, to apologize for his company, to plead his case. Perhaps, he thought, he could get a severance package. Perhaps he could just get an answer. To his shock, Vance agreed. The meeting was scheduled for 2 days later, in Chicago, Vance's office. They even paid for the economy-class plane ticket, an act that felt less like generosity and more like a summons. He flew to Chicago wearing his last good suit, which now hung loosely on his frame. He had not eaten in a day. He was ushered by a silent assistant into a conference room on the top floor of the building. It was less a room and more a canyon of glass and polished wood. A single mahogany table, impossibly long, stretched toward a panoramic window that overlooked Lake Michigan, grey and cold. At the far end of the table, silhouetted against the bright, unforgiving light, sat a woman. She was facing the window, her back to him. Mark shuffled into the room, his hands trembling. Mrs. Stone, he ventured. His voice was a dry croak. The high-backed leather chair turned, swiveling with a slow, expensive silence. Mark's entire body went rigid. The blood drained from his face, leaving a pale, sickly mask of disbelief. He made a small, choking sound. "Mum?" I looked at him. I examined this strange, broken man who was once my son. The tailored wool suit I wore was comfortable. My silver hair was immaculate. I felt absolutely nothing. "Hello, Mark," I said. My voice was not my own. It was the clear, cold, measured voice of Mrs. Stone. "Thank you for coming. Sit down." He did not sit. He stumbled forward, his knees hitting the chair opposite me. He gripped the back of it, his knuckles white. "It was you," he whispered, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrible horror. "The contract, the new fee, my job. It was all you." "Yes," I said. I placed my hands flat on the table. "You were right. Mark, you told Brenda that my medication was just delaying the inevitable." The carefully constructed denial he had lived in shattered. The man who had put on headphones to ignore his mother's desperation finally, completely, broke. He collapsed into the chair, and the sobs that ripped out of him were violent and grotesque. He cried, his face dissolving into a crumpled mess. He cried about how hard his job was. He cried about the pressure. He cried about Brenda. It was her, he wailed, pounding a weak fist on the table. "She was in my head. She said you were a burden. She made me hate. I never wanted this, Mom. I am so sorry. Please." I let him. I sat in perfect, cold silence and watched him empty himself of every excuse, every lie, every pathetic justification. I watched him blame the woman who had left him, the job that had fired him, the world that had, in his mind, conspired against him. When his sobs finally subsided into wet, choking gasps, and the room was silent again, I slid a thin, leather-bound folder across the table. It stopped precisely in front of his trembling hands. He looked at it, confused, his eyes red and raw. What is this?" "It is the invoice," I said. He opened it. His eyes struggled to focus on the itemized list. "First," I said, reciting it for him. "The full, out-of-pocket cost for the 3-month supply of heart medication my daughter-in-law destroyed. Second, the cost for 3 weeks of institutionalization at Pinecrest Meadows. Third, the legal and psychiatric evaluation fees associated with voiding the medical power of attorney you illegally used to imprison me. And fourth, the early termination penalty Pinecrest charged the trust for my unscheduled departure." He stared at the final number. I cannot," he whispered, shaking his head. "Mum, I have nothing. She took everything. The bank. The house. I am ruined. I have nothing." "I know," I said. I stood up, smoothing the front of my jacket. "But you will pay it. You will find a way. If you have to work every day for the rest of your life, you will pay back every cent. You wanted me to get it over with. Son." I turned and walked toward the door. "Mum, wait," he cried out, a sound of pure panic. "Please do not leave me. I am your son." I stopped, my hand on the heavy brass handle. I looked back at him. This stranger, this hollowed-out man, drowning in the consequences of his own actions. "And I have," I said. "I am finished with you." I walked out of the conference room and did not look back, leaving him alone to face the absolute ruin he had created for himself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So drop a comment below to share your thoughts. Make sure you subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, And give us extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.